Most men spend their entire lives trying to look strong, without ever becoming the kind of man people truly respect. And the craziest part? Sometimes the biggest proof that you've grown isn't money, muscles, or status. It's something much deeper, something quieter. 10 signs you've become the man your mom always hoped for is not about perfection. It's about transformation. Because a lot of men never realize when they've actually crossed the line between being a boy reacting to life and becoming a man capable of leading it. And if you've ever wondered whether you're truly evolving or just getting older, this video might hit harder than you expect. So, before we start, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey to becoming stronger, wiser, and more respected men. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and every man who joins helps build a community focused on real masculine growth, not fake internet motivation. Topic 1: he stops blaming everyone else for his life. There's a quiet moment in a lot of men's lives that changes absolutely everything. It doesn't happen with epic music playing in the background or some motivational quote from the internet. It happens when he realizes he spent years blaming his parents, the government, relationships, lack of money. But deep down, nothing was changing because he kept handing control of his life over to other people. And honestly, that truth stings, because it's way easier to say, my life would be different if, than admit some bad decisions also had his fingerprints all over them. Emotionally immature men live trapped in this mental courtroom where there's always somebody to blame. The boss never appreciated him. His ex destroyed his confidence. His friends disappeared. His childhood messed him up. And yeah, some of those wounds are real. But there's a huge difference between recognizing pain and turning that pain into a permanent identity. A strong man understands the past can explain a lot, but it can't keep driving his life forever. It's like getting dealt a terrible hand in poker and still learning how to play the game better than everyone else at the table. And it's interesting how a man's life starts changing when he replaces the question, "Who ruined my life?" with, "What can I do from here?" Small habits start showing up almost naturally. He wakes up earlier, takes better care of his body, stops wasting energy trying to prove himself to people who don't even care. Even his relationships start changing because responsibility carries a different kind of energy. And without realizing it, he starts carrying himself differently. Calmer, steadier, more grounded than most men ever become. But there's something else people notice about emotionally mature men, and it shows up very clearly in the way they treat the people around them. Topic 2: he treats women with respect, even when no one is watching. There's a massive difference between men who seem nice and men who actually have character. And most of the time, that difference shows up in how they treat women when there's no audience around. Because any guy can open a door or act like a gentleman when he's trying to impress someone. The real test happens in invisible moments, in the way he talks about his ex when he's around his friends, the way he responds to an exhausted waitress after a long day, or even the tone he uses with his own mother when nobody else is listening. A lot of men grew up believing masculinity meant dominating, controlling, or never showing too much kindness. Like respect somehow made you weak. But mature men understand something powerful. Treating women well doesn't take away from their masculinity. It reveals how emotionally secure they are. An insecure man tries to feel strong by humiliating people, making sarcastic comments, or playing games with emotions. A grounded man doesn't feel the need to win every argument or prove superiority all the time. He understands respect isn't a performance. It's part of who he is. And maybe one of the most interesting things about this is that women usually notice this type of man almost immediately. Not because he's trying hard to seduce or impress them, but because there's a rare calmness about him. He listens without constantly interrupting. He doesn't turn every conversation into a competition. He gives off confidence without needing to raise his voice. And interestingly enough, that same quiet control starts showing up in other areas of his life too. Especially in the way he handles his emotions when things start falling apart. Topic 3: he learns how to control his emotions instead of exploding. Not many people talk about this honestly, but a lot of men spend their whole lives confusing emotional explosions with strength. They grow up hearing things like, "real men don't back down," or You gotta show people who's boss. And without realizing it, they start turning every frustration into anger. The problem is losing control was never a sign of power. Most of the time, it's actually the opposite. Because a man who explodes over everything is basically showing that anyone can control his emotional state just by pushing the right buttons. Emotionally mature men understand something that completely changes the way they live. Feeling anger is normal, but being controlled by it is dangerous. And this shows up in everyday situations. Traffic, relationship arguments, disrespectful comments at work. An impulsive man reacts in the heat of the moment and then spends hours trying to fix words that should have never left his mouth. A centered man learns to create space between emotion and reaction. Sometimes he just breathes, stays quiet for a few seconds, and realizes not every battle deserves his energy. That's not weakness. That's emotional intelligence. And there's a quiet side effect to this self-control that people don't notice at first. Others start trusting him more. Friends ask him for advice. Relationships become lighter and healthier. Even his presence changes, because calm men make people feel safe without even trying. It's like he stops being a boy reacting to life and finally becomes someone capable of leading it. But something else starts happening once a man learns how to control his emotions. He begins to understand the weight behind every word that comes out of his mouth. Topic 4. He keeps his word, even in small things. There's something extremely rare these days. Men people can genuinely rely on, and we're not just talking about huge promises or life-changing moments. A man's character usually shows up in the small things nobody thinks matter. When he says he'll call, and actually calls. When he sets a time and shows up on time. When he promises to improve something and genuinely works on it. Because at the end of the day, words without action slowly wear down trust like water dripping on stone. Little by little. Non-stop. A lot of men want respect without realizing respect doesn't come from what someone says about themselves. It comes from consistency. And consistency sounds simple, but it's hard, especially in a world full of excuses, empty promises, and people running on autopilot. A mature man understands that every time he breaks his word, even in small ways, he weakens the trust he has in himself. That's why disciplined men usually carry a different kind of presence. They don't need to convince people they're serious, their actions already do that for them. And maybe the most powerful part about this is realizing that keeping your word changes the way a man sees himself. He starts building real self-respect, not the loud kind of confidence built on appearance or outside validation. Because there's a quiet peace that comes from knowing people can count on you. And interestingly enough, when a man stops trying to impress people with words, he also starts realizing how much energy he wasted chasing approval from people who were never truly in his corner. Topic 5. He starts protecting his peace instead of chasing validation. One of the quietest and most powerful shifts in a man's life happens when he realizes how much of his life was spent trying to be accepted. Accepted by friends, women, social media, family, sometimes even by people who never truly cared about him in the first place. And the crazy part is that a lot of men think they're chasing success, when in reality they're just chasing emotional validation in disguise. Every flashy purchase, every desperate need to show off results, every attempt to impress people nonstop. Deep down, it's often just a silent cry for approval. Mature men eventually realize peace is worth far more than attention, and that realization changes the way they live. They stop arguing with strangers online, stop reacting to every little provocation, stop wasting money trying to look important. It's like they finally understand not every opinion deserves space inside their head. And honestly, that's freedom. Because a man who depends on other people's approval becomes emotionally enslaved by the environment around him. But a man who's at peace with himself can walk into a room without needing to prove a single thing. And maybe one of life's biggest ironies is this. The less desperately a man tries to impress everyone, the more respect he naturally earns. There's something incredibly powerful about a man who knows exactly who he is. A man who can sit alone without constantly needing applause, attention, or validation. And when that need for approval slowly disappears, something else starts taking its place. A deeper concern for stability, responsibility, and building a future that actually means something. Topic 6. He becomes financially responsible. Even before becoming rich. There's a huge difference between looking rich and building a financially solid life. And a lot of men realize that way too late. For years, they were taught to associate success with appearances, the right car, the right watch, the right clothes. But truly mature men understand something that completely changes the game. Financial responsibility doesn't begin when money starts overflowing. It begins when a man stops sabotaging his own future, and that applies whether he's making little money or a lot of it. Financially responsible man isn't necessarily a millionaire. Sometimes he's still building his life step by step, but there's a different mindset inside him. He learns how to control impulses, stops buying things just to numb temporary emotions, starts understanding interest, investing, emergency savings, and financial freedom. And the interesting part is that this creates a kind of peace that badly managed money could never buy. Books like The Psychology of Money or Rich Dad, Poor Dad open a lot of men's eyes because they show that real wealth has way more to do with behavior than status. And there's something deeply masculine about building stability. Not in the shallow way social media talks about it, but in that quiet feeling of knowing you can take care of yourself and protect the people you love if life gets hard. It changes the way a man carries himself. He stops living only for short-term pleasure and starts thinking long-term. And interestingly enough, the more financially mature he becomes, the more he realizes money alone was never the center of life, because eventually the people closest to him start needing something money can't buy. Topic 7. He knows how to be present for the people he loves. One of the saddest things about adulthood is realizing how many men are physically present, but emotionally absent. They're sitting at the dinner table, but mentally scrolling through their phone. They hear someone talking, but their mind is somewhere else. Work, bills, distractions, stress. And over time, without realizing it, they start missing moments they'll never get back. Because presence isn't just about being near someone. It's about making that person feel like they genuinely matter in that moment. Mature men eventually understand something many people never learn. People rarely remember perfect speeches, but they always remember how someone made them feel. A father putting his phone down for 20 minutes to really talk to his son can create a memory that lasts decades. A man who truly listens to his partner strengthens a relationship far more than someone constantly buying expensive gifts. And it's amazing how small gestures create deep emotional connections. Genuinely asking, "How are you?" and actually listening to the answer has become surprisingly rare nowadays. Maybe that's why emotionally strong men aren't afraid to slow down sometimes. They understand that building a meaningful life isn't just about stacking money, status, or achievements. It's also about building memories, trust, and human connection. Because at the end of the day, nobody looks back wishing they answered more emails or spent more hours mindlessly scrolling social media. And the more a man learns how to be present for the people he loves, the more he starts realizing another important truth. Maturity also means no longer needing to be the center of attention all the time. Topic 8. He stops trying to impress everyone in the room. There comes a very specific moment in a man's life when he realizes how exhausted he is from performing all the time. Performing as the funniest guy in the room, the strongest, the smartest, the most desired. For years, a lot of men walk into every environment already thinking about how they'll be perceived, like every conversation is some silent audition for approval. And honestly, it's exhausting, because living to impress everyone eventually disconnects a man from who he actually is when nobody's watching. Emotionally mature men slowly let go of this constant need to perform. They realize real confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to interrupt people constantly, exaggerate stories, or turn every interaction into an ego competition. And ironically, the moment a man stops desperately trying to impress everyone, people start respecting him more. Because there's something incredibly powerful about a man who feels comfortable in his own identity. A secure man doesn't need to be the loudest person in the room. Most of the time, he's actually the calmest. And maybe one of the biggest signs of masculine maturity is this: being able to walk into a room without needing immediate validation, without forcing charisma every second. He learns to observe more, listen better, and carefully choose who deserves access to his energy. That changes friendships, relationships, and even career opportunities. Because emotionally grounded men naturally give off stability without even trying. But there's an even deeper layer of maturity that very few men ever reach, especially when it comes to the relationship they had with their father. Topic 9. He accepts his father's flaws without becoming them. Very few things affect a man as deeply as the relationship he had with his father. Even men who claim they don't care usually carry silent scars from it. Some grew up desperately trying to earn approval. Others spent their entire lives promising themselves they would never become like him. And strangely enough, the harder a man tries to run from his father's flaws without understanding them, the more likely he is to repeat the same patterns without realizing it. Because ignored pain always finds quiet ways to stay alive. Mature men eventually understand something extremely difficult. Accepting their father's flaws doesn't mean excusing everything that happened. It means stopping that anger from becoming a permanent identity. Maybe his father was emotionally absent. Maybe he never showed pride. Maybe he failed during important moments. But eventually, every man has to decide whether he'll keep living as a reaction to the past, or finally start building a more conscious version of himself. And that takes courage, because blaming previous generations is much easier than breaking emotional patterns inside your own life. And there's a very different kind of peace that comes when a man can look at his family history with emotional maturity. He starts realizing wounded men often raise other wounded men, not always out of cruelty, but because they never learned another way to live. That understanding doesn't erase the pain, but it stops the pain from controlling his future. And maybe that's exactly when a man becomes truly admirable. When younger people around him start seeing him as the kind of example he wishes he had growing up. Topic 10. He becomes the kind of man younger boys can look up to. Maybe one of the strongest signs a man has truly matured is when he realizes he's no longer living only for himself. Even without children, status, or millions in the bank, he starts understanding that people are watching him all the time. Younger brothers, nephews, friends' kids, even strangers. Because men influence other men constantly, whether they realize it or not. And interestingly enough, silent examples usually teach way more than perfect speeches ever could. Immature men usually crave attention. Mature men start caring about legacy. They understand that boys learn by watching how a man treats women, handles frustration, talks about money, reacts under pressure, and treats people when nobody's watching. And that changes the way he approaches life completely. Suddenly, small decisions stop being just personal choices. They become invisible examples for someone still trying to figure out what being a man even means in such an emotionally confused world. And maybe that's the exact moment many mothers would realize their son finally became the man they always hoped he would be. Not because he became perfect, not because he never fails, but because there's responsibility, character, balance, and presence inside him now. There's maturity where impulsiveness used to be, awareness where ego used to be. And deep down, a lot of men spend years chasing respect from the world without realizing the real transformation begins when they can finally look at their own life and genuinely feel proud of the man they're becoming. Conclusion? At the end of the day, becoming the man your mother always hoped for has nothing to do with being perfect. It's about becoming more conscious, more responsible, more emotionally strong. It's about learning how to carry yourself with integrity, even when nobody's watching. And maybe the most important question is this: when you look at the man you're becoming today, would your younger self feel inspired by you? Would the people around you feel safe trusting you, learning from you, depending on you? Because real masculinity isn't loud. It's built quietly through discipline, self-control, honesty, and the way a man treats people when life gets hard. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these signs hit you the hardest? And which one are you still working on? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because this channel is for men who are serious about growth, confidence, discipline, and becoming the strongest version of themselves. We're getting closer to 1,000 subscribers, and you being here genuinely helps build something powerful for men who want more out of life.